Welcome to Inner Niña Podcast, embracing your inner child while leading with strength. This is a space for Latina women and beyond who are ready to break generational cycles and lead from a place of wholeness. Together, we will reconnect with the little girl inside, the one who dreamed big, felt deeply, and longed to be seen, and honor her as we step in fully into our power. Join me, Maria Elena, for heartfelt reflections and empowering conversations about identity, healing, culture, and leadership. Each episode invites you to embrace your inner niña while leading with authenticity, compassion, and courage. Welcome back to Inner Niña. Today we welcome a special guest. Her name is Maria Elena Greenman-Lynde. Maria Elena is a justice advocate who uses her lived-in experience within the criminal legal system to empower formerly incarcerated individuals in marginalized communities. She is the founder of Homegirlz del Corazón, Inc., a healing center organization that supports women and youth impacted by poverty, violence, addiction, gang involvement, and incarceration through self-love, healing, and personal transformation. Maria Elena has served on the California Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights and previously worked as the Justice Impacted Community Liaison for the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties, supporting the National Smart Justice Campaign. She currently works within the California and San Diego County Juvenile and Criminal Justice System as a trauma-informed gang expert consultant and partners with other juvenile justice advocates to support youth development and community healing. Thank you, Maria Elena. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today and being part of our Inner Niña journey. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for inviting me to be in this space. I'm super excited about our conversation and just being really open and authentic with one another.
I'm grateful that you're here, and just so you know how we got introduced, we will have now a mutual friend in common, which is our recent Inner Niña community member now, is Maria Mary Gonzalez, who recently did an episode and shared her heartfelt story with us, and she's been working closely with Maria Elena in Homegirlz del Corazón. So tell us about Maria Elena. What are you working on, your background, and your family heritage?
Well, it's a very long story. I'm a 49-year-old woman in Southern California who lives in Tijuana. So I have a lot of spaces that I work in, but I guess the number one thing I really want to focus on is what led me into this work. And when I was born in New Mexico, and I was given up for adoption. And that was the first love story I ever experienced was with my father. Did not understand until I got much older and began to dig within my traumas of why certain experiences have had such a huge impact on my choices in life. If you were to see me and I walk into a room, there's an automatic stigma about me or certain biases. You know, I'm full of tattoos. I have a certain look. I'm very vibrant. And predominantly in a woman's world, that's something that you don't show. And so what I've worked really hard is to be the authentic version of myself that I really fought for a very long time, but didn't have the voice. So to start the story off, I was adopted by this beautiful family. My mother is Spanish. My father was Anglo-Saxon, and may he rest in peace. But he was the first man that I ever loved. He taught me what love was, what caring was, but he also lived with the struggle with alcoholism. My mother was also living and trying to cope with that situation. But as a young girl, I didn't know that stuff was going on. I just knew that I had a very sense of loneliness. My adoption story was it's amazing that you're adopted, but that does not take away from the lack of identity. So as I go into my story more, I began to see that I didn't have the same color skin as my father. I didn't have the same color skin as my grandfather. I was not understanding of that. My parents did the best they could, but I still struggled with identity. So to make it aware, I would grew up thinking, knowing that I am half Native American from New Mexico. And then also too was on my birth certificate that my father was Hispanic. Years later, going through the process of finding out who my real biological parents were, is that my mother, she is the full Native American, and that my father on the birth certificate was not my father. So there was another lack of identity. So through storytelling within that family, I've come to find out that the story is that my birth father was an immigrant from Mexico, who needed papers, and that my mother married and had a child with him. and my birth mother had multiple children with multiple men, and gave all the girls up for adoption. So that was my identity, not knowing that. But now looking at generational cycles and DNA, I've come to realize my life is very identical to my own birth mother's story. So that's who I was and what I was coming to this world with. And I've come to understand that my story was created for me to bring love and light into this world and healing. Like I said, when you see me, you don't think the conversations I'm going to carry is around trauma and healing because of my past experiences. So things began to navigate. And when real trauma began to happen in my life was when I was 7 years old. And I will be very open and honest. I'm a very vulnerable person. That's where my healing has brought me to, because I want to create a world that people can talk about these things, because little Maria Elena did not have a voice. So it would have been considered I was sexually abused, raped at 7 years old. And it was a consistent thing that happened. And that really changed my belief of what love was and sexuality, or even, and connection and intimacy. It really hurt my little girl's thoughts, right? And I've had to go through a long process of healing that part. And I'll be honest, it was easier for me to forgive the person who abused me than the actual people that were not there for me. And that created this story of Maria Elena and how she looked. So my adopted mom did the best with everything that she could. And now I understand a little bit more of who she was from her own childhood. And I've learned to forgive her through the process. But when that stuff was going on with me, I didn't know how to cope. And so I began to eat a lot of food. That was my numbie. That was my first addiction. My mother, unfortunately, did not know what was going on. And I have to give her that, acknowledgement. She did not know what was going on with me. She did not know that I was struggling with that. But what she saw was a concern now that her daughter was becoming overweight. And sometimes her language wasn't or her approach was not the most healthiest for a young girl. So I remember being told, if you lose 10 pounds, we'll take you on a $100 shopping spree on Rodeo Drive. And sometimes I thought, is that a real thing? Or, I was in Weight Watchers at 9 years old, walking into a meeting full of shame when there's a bunch of older women there that were not representation of who I was. But all I knew growing up was that I was not pretty enough in my head. I was not thin enough. And I did see my mom kind of idolize, because I was in a lot of school activities growing up. Like, she would idolize the young, small girls. And I know now that that's a behavior she's learned from her own childhood and her parenting. But to that, what it ended up leading is that, my parents ended up getting divorced. There's a deeper story within that. We'd have to have 4 podcasts to be able to talk about that part. But to stay focused on me, it really opened up a door and led me to a lot of abandonment issues, loneliness, the sexual abuse that I went through, my dad's alcoholism, and the lack of a mother who did not know how to love me emotionally the way a young girl needed. So I ended up getting caught up in certain behaviors. They try to move me around, but come to realize you can't hide from yourself, and you can't move that person around, think there's going to be change. That person has to be ready for it. And at the age of 13, 14, I wasn't. And so when I was brought back to the Coachella Valley, which I was born in, I grew up and was raised in Indio, California, I was brought back there. And I pretty much at that point had to raise my dad in his alcoholism. I was being left at friends' houses for months at a time while he was looking for work because he couldn't keep a job. But what that led to was then me hitting the streets and finding validation from the homies inside the hood. I'm going to be very honest. This is a story that really sticks out to me. I always wanted to just have a friend, have a best friend, a girl that I could talk to. And the one friend that I did share with happened to me years later when I was 8th grade. It came out. She shared with her mom out of concern that what I had experienced as a young girl. And back to my mother, what that ended up leading to was when it was brought to my mom's attention all these years, what I had experienced was not what a young girl needed. I needed a mom to be like, Mija, what happened? Please talk to me, embrace me, love me, and make me feel safe. Create that safe space to have this conversation. And I always remember she was sitting watching her tennis, and I still hate tennis to this day. But she was watching her tennis game, and she turned around, and she's like, so-and-so's mom called me. She was concerned. She said, this is what happened. Is it true? Well, when you ask a young 12, 13-year-old girl that, it was shame. Because I remember trying to hide the phone from her for forever that day because I had a feeling she was going to find out. So that overwhelming shame came in, and my mom didn't see that. And I was like, no. I kind of tried to deny it. But she kind of pushed a little harder, and it's finally was like, yes, it did happen. And my mom didn't have the coping skills to be the mom that I needed in that moment. She goes, well, if it ever happens again, let me know. And pretty much just turned her back to her tennis game. And so for me, that was the hardest person to forgive because it wasn't the person who actually assaulted me. It was the lack of what I needed to be protected. And I think that's what, going back to the gang life, is what I found in the hood. I felt like I was protected, but I didn't like how I felt in the hood. And I'm going to be very honest about that because they're like, I created this mask, right? I work with the youth and we talk about these masks that we wear. And I had a heavy armor by then. And I remember, like, I was walking with the homegirl down Highway 111 one night. We're looking at the lowriders, trying to get boys' attention. And I remember the homegirl goes, "Hey, you know why they're scared of you, right?" Or no, she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "You know why they're scared of you, right?" And I go, "Why?" Like thinking like back to my story, like I just want friends, right? She's like, "Because you look scary." And I was like, the little girl in me was like, so sad. I don't want to look scary. I don't want to look, to me, I connected to how my mom saw me, right? Ugly, not pretty enough, not thin enough. And, but then it became a safeguard for me. It became a safe space for Maria Elena to be on the streets. And then at the same time, remember the sexual assault kind of really messed my mind up around intimacy. So I got very promiscuous as a young girl. So I created this identity about being around trying to get a boy to love me as well as being scary. So no one would hurt me. And that led to a life of drug addiction, 25 plus years of meth addiction. I'm a mother of 5 children with 5 fathers. And that's my story. I never thought that all that trauma would have such a huge impact on how I parented or did not parent. And this is where I have to be accountable, right? So I was pregnant with my first daughter, Angelica, at the age of 17. She was with me incarcerated. I like to say she was, and then when I share my story nationwide, I'll go share like my daughter was incarcerated before she was even born. She was with me inside the juvenile hall inside my stomach. And that's a story that she'll always have to remember about her first sense of identity. And I created that due to my hurts. And after having her, I started doing good, but then it was still trying to find that man to be with me, trying to keep a guy with me. Some guy from the hood, just please love on me, anything. And that really connected me to my meth addiction. It kept me in a really stuck place there. I experienced my first domestic violence at the age of 19 years old. Ever since then, all my relationships, minus one, have been domestic violence to the point where I even became the perpetrator due to my abandonment issues. So between being in the lifestyle, moving around a lot, longing to be loved, here I was having baby after baby, and these children were seeing severe abuse. And to the point where even years later, my first son, who's my third child, was physically abused by one of the fathers of my other children. And I've had to really dig deep within that part to forgive myself because I did not protect him. I was not there. I was not available to my children. And I'm very authentic when it comes to my story with my kids. Like I literally gave my kids to Child Protective Services. And I'll share a real brief story that tells you how deep my addiction was, not just to the drugs, but to the men, the need of love, and to the lifestyle in the hood. The day that my kids, and I knew it, I was already living out here in San Diego for a little bit. And I remember living in Lemon Grove, and my dad was in his full-blown alcoholism. I would just leave my kids with him, and I'd cross the border to go to Tijuana because I lived in Tijuana back and forth at that time. My son was 2 years old. He had already gone through the abuse that I shared about right now. And then he was two and a half years old. And I don't know if you know the cartoon character Caillou with the little bald head. And, well, that's what my son looked like. Yeah, please go look at it. But that's what my son looked like. And I remember him walking up to me with a diaper and just going, Nana, Nana. He wanted a banana. But my mind was, I'm packing up the car. I'm getting all my clothes. I'm going to split because I have to be somewhere. I need to go be with him. I need to go get high. I need to not be a mom. And what ended up happening is that I remember looking at my son and that gut instinct, that intuition that we're all born with, right, just hit. And I remember, and I could look at him today and still see that look in his eyes. I knew when I came back, he would not be there, neither or my other 2 kids at the time. And that addiction was so strong, that pull, that I still chose to let leave. So I got him a piece of banana, sat him on the couch, yelled at my dad, Gino's in here, because the girls were at school, and I left for 2 weeks. I remember crossing back over, coming back to Lemon Grove 2 weeks later. The house in Lemon Grove was just like it was like dusk at night. So it was kind of getting really dark, and which was not normal. Normally the house was full of lights and kids everywhere. I walked into the house and my dad, and he was still back in his room, passed out. And I was waking him up and I'm like, Dad, where are the kids? And he goes, CPS came and took them. The paperwork's on the table. And mind you, at that time I was pregnant with my fourth child, my son, Peter. And to be very honest with all of you, my story is that out of my 5 pregnancies, I used methamphetamines with 4 of my children and almost lost 2 in the process to CPS. But thank goodness when I gave birth to them, they were clean, even though I came out dirty. So at that time when they were taken, I was already pregnant with my 4th child. And I was terrified, like, oh my gosh, CPS took my other kids. Oh my gosh, are they going to take this baby that I'm pregnant with? I got to get clean. And so I got my first CPS case, and it was a very big eye opener. I like to say that it changed things for me, but it didn't. A year later, I got my kids back after, doing everything needed to get them back. And within 6 months, I was getting high again. And that's the insanity, the madness of what my trauma has caused to protect that little girl within me to not feel all that hurt that she had never acknowledged before. So now here we are, 2026, right? And in 2019, through my process of education, in 2011, let's start back to 2011. I was brought back to San Diego. I had been living in Indio for a mad minute. My dad was living over here raising 2 of my kids. My mom had 2 of my kids in Indio, and my ex-husband had my little girl. I had hit severe rock bottom at that point. And my ex-husband, and this is the story I share with everybody. The Coachella Valley did not want me no more. No matter how much I fought to stay there, they're like, I had burned all my bridges in all the recovery homes. In the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, I burned my bridges there. My kids who were in their early teens were like, we're just done, Mom, we can't. And my mom was like, I got to protect them. So if they don't want you, I can't have you around. I was living in the dope house with my ex-husband, and I was getting tired of being in the street. I was getting tired of putting in work. And I was getting in the way of his using and his moves he had to make. And I remember we were just fighting, living in the dope house. And he's like, you got to go. And I was like, what do you mean I got to go? And I just don't want to get high no more. And so he called my dad and he goes, come get her. And with 2 big trash bags that I had and a small little old suitcase, my dad picked me up from San Diego and I came here. And I've been here ever since in San Diego County and Tijuana, and it's changed my life. I've had so many experiences that have been the eye-openers to leading me to my calling, not only as a homegirl, but as a healer in my community. My voice was so suppressed that it was ready to scream when I got to school. So I enrolled at San Diego City College with every intent to manipulate the system so I could have some kind of financial means, right? There's FAFSA. Because my background, I went to juvenile court, I did adult court. I'd never done prison time. I just had, misdemeanors for a lot of assault and batteries as an adult. And so that was stuff that I left back, being arrested or being incarcerated, I left back in my 20s. That does not mean the madness didn't end. So when I got to San Diego, I just knew I had to have some way of money. And I knew looking for work was very intimidating because it's really quick to get rejected when your criminal record comes up. And here I am, the pressure of having my kids back in my life, trying to do something better, trying to stay clean and sober in the rooms of recovery and become, really grounded in that space as well. It was really, really hard, but education created this beautiful opportunity to find who I was. And so when we were talking earlier about my identity, I really want to focus on my lack of being half Native American. And my parents were really trying so hard to get me to connect with my Native American parts of myself. But because that abandonment, I had no interest. I was just like, no, they didn't understand that. I think now that my mother is older and we've had our healing, she can recognize why. I'm now hearing my story more in depth. But when I got to school, I remember taking my first La Chicana class, and that changed everything for me. It was like I found home. And it wasn't just a Chicano version of the class, it was La Chicana. And it was like, yes, this is focused on women. Like, this is my voice. And I remember being so empowered in that class and having so much to say. And one point, the professor, it was during the 1%, 99% that was going on down here and throughout the country, right? But San Diego was really prominent downtown. And I'm an overachiever, so any extra credit, I'm going to do any extra credit because I want to make sure I'm A+, And the professor has said for extra credit, if you go to this march and write a paper on it, you'll get extra credit. Mind you, I have these kids in my life, and I'm going to go back to my little boy that I abandoned, right? He was stuck to me like glue when I moved back down to San Diego. He was just all my kids. And unfortunately, to this day, two of my kids have still chosen not to have a relationship with me, and I respect that and will be here, and I will continue to heal until they're ready for their process. I can't deny them that or their space. But back to my son, Gino, I was like, first of all, I didn't want to go to this march because I'm a small area. So San Diego's big. It's like, it's like kind of, do I want to be around all these people? I have anxiety. Kind of find out was that I've been living with ADHD for my whole life. So I wasn't going to go to this march for myself. So like, come on, mijo, let's go. And I remember just marching and chanting and raising our fists down the street and feeling, and my little boy just like holding my hand and looking up at me like so proud of me. That little boy is now 25 years old, and one of my, it's like, that child you have that's just like you. He's just like me. And I love my kids all so much, but it's so differently, right? Every child's different, but they're a different part of who you are. But that changed my life. That was the first time my voice felt expressed. It wasn't suppressed. And I had people around me with my child there with me advocating, like, yes, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what I did. I got into the work and really focused on being a formerly incarcerated student on campus, working with organizations and then creating my own to have a voice on the campus at City College. We were the first formerly incarcerated community college organization in the schools throughout California at that time. We were the Urban Scholars Union, and we made big strides. We created spaces and job opportunities for for adults on campus who were coming from our background to have a presence. We're speaking and sharing our stories. But this is where my work really began to stem at, is that I saw so much trauma still in our community. Coming home from prison, coming out of the jail system, coming out of recovery, we get this desire to we want to change things now. We're finally empowered. But if we are not given healthy tools and we haven't worked on ourselves, we're going to bring that same damage back into our work. And when I began to kind of bring that into our space, people are like, nope, I don't want to deal with myself. And I remember this one girl I brought up, like, should we bring in a mediator, like a therapist to work with what we're going through in our group? And the girl literally pushed from her desk, nope. I didn't come here to school to work on myself. I came here to be a social worker. And I was like, that terrified me. I mean, and much respect to her, but it terrified me that she didn't have that consciousness that how you show up and who you are and what you work through is going to show up every single day, whether it shows up in your home, it shows up by yourself, it shows up with your community, school, work, it's there. And so that's when I began to really look into these spaces, especially in the nonprofit world, about trauma-informed care and bring it in. So after school, I'm one class off from having my associate's degree in social science, social sociology because of my biology. I also realized that I have learning disabilities that I never got the support for when I was at school, that I now wish that I had. I could have been more productive, but I thrived in school. They hired me. I was literally the girl on campus, and it felt good, but it didn't feel good when I was seeing people not treated correctly. And I saw the education system as another system, just like the criminal justice system, just like the juvenile system. It's a system in place. And unfortunately, it broke my heart to see that this education space gave me so much identity and pride and love for who I was. Then it broke my heart because I got into the background of it. And it was so at that time, a position at the ACL came along for someone who was formerly incarcerated. I had been volunteering and was one of their leaders at the time. And they were pretty much come apply for this job. And so I did, and I jumped in and I loved it. And it was a beautiful place. But then I also began to see poster child syndrome coming up in that workspace. I will have so much respect for the ACLU at the local level and at the national level, because they embraced me and they were open to listen to about what it's like to work with formerly incarcerated people. They were open to have us there in their workspaces to work in an equitable space, not just looking at it as an equal space, right? But what I began to see in that nonprofit space and other ones that I work with is that from the leadership down, if trauma's not being addressed, it's not going to be a healthy space. And the more that I pushed on that, the more that it was pushed out. So at that time, I'm really proud. The executive director was a mentor for me for a very long time. And I took pride when she said, I think you're ready to start your own nonprofit, your own organization. And some people might have taken that as a push away. I took it as a challenge. And here we are today. And so Homegirlz del Corazón came out of my own love story for myself. It came out of an experience of beginning to address some deep-rooted trauma Because like I said, a big part of my story is I just wanted friends. I wanted girlfriends who I could, trust with. I had lost that growing up. That innocence of my childhood friendship with girls was lost. And so what we see in this world, and it's not just the hood stuff. It's just not like lower income communities. It's not people of color. It's just people and women. Women have a harder time connecting. We emotionally connect to our traumas. And my trauma with women began with my mom. It was that like, oh, she's prettier than me because my mom thought she was prettier than me. So what do I see now? If I'm in a partnership, if I see a pretty girl walk in, all of a sudden my anger is going towards that girl and not the partner I'm with. So we see it every single day. There's just like this girl on girl hate. It's like that Mean Girls, like not just middle school though, or high school. It's like a lifelong series that I see happening. And I realized there was a certain situation I remember on Facebook one early morning, and it was all behind a mail. I got a message, a DM from this girl who was pretty much just like threw shade at me and did like this. It was very hurtful. And she talked about their situation and things that was said about me. And I had already begun my healing process, mind you. And I was like, working at the ACLU. And my first trigger was like, don't react. I said as easy as I could without being aggressive to her. It was like, this is not how it's going to happen. Me and this person are going to be friends with, or, whatever the situation was. But I remember driving to the ACLU in my high heels and my little cute dress, messaging my homegirls, like the friends I started to have, like, I'm going to go down to Downey. I don't care what her situation is. I'm going to pull her out. I'm going to hurt her. And they're like, hey, you've worked so hard to be where you're at. Why are you going to go backwards? And it was the first time that I had homegirls uplift me in a positive sense instead of, okay, let's go. I'll meet you what we got to pull up to. And it was so empowering to have someone advocate for me and lift me up that I don't have to hurt that person. And what I've come to realize through the process of empathy and looking at my own self in the mirror is that girl who approached me the way she did, I remember being her. I remember sending those kind of messages to the father of my children's other girlfriends and be like, don't you know who I am? And I had to gather that empathy was like real. And that's where my healing process with women began. And Homegirlz del Corazón was based off that story. I started getting women together, having these conversations, and it's blossomed, and it's turned into a curriculum that I take into the juvenile facilities. We have done them at women's recovery homes. We do them in the community when it's available because, lack of resources is a real thing with this work. And it's really hit a core place. And I like to say that this curriculum does not just work with people from my background, right? It's not just homegirls anymore. I'm doing this curriculum and training people who are public defenders, who are attorneys here in California. I've had conversations, and this is just called a conversation with one of the community reps from one of the districts. Maybe we can provide this training for the staff, for your district, for your board, for your supervisors, right? Like and it's such a simplistic place to be at and approach because it's all based off self-awareness. It's so simple. And what I do is I make it very creative. Like it's just not, let's sit here, listen to a training, hear about trauma. And when I do presentations, I'll be like, okay, we're gonna start talking about trauma. No one needs to run to go check emails. No one needs to go to the bathroom. Like I know this is gonna get uncomfortable, but I'm gonna make sure you get comfortable in a safe space. And so that's what I create, and that's what I do with Homegirlz del Corazón. So that's pretty much what our organization does and provides here in San Diego County.
Wow, that's incredible. First of all, thank you for sharing your heartfelt story and being humble and really exposing your hurt, right? Because you can sense it, and you could tell that a lot happened through your childhood background. And what I just want to touch base on what you share, what happened to you as a child. I'm so sorry that you went through that. No child should ever go through that. And I know that you're still in a journey of healing because that you can't recover from that. It takes time. But I think you're in the right track. And to your point with your adopted mom, I'm sure she, like you mentioned, she had her own demons that she was still navigating and not knowing how to address it. And I'm sorry that she did not embrace you or show empathy when she found out. Like what happened to you was like, oh, tell me if it happens again, like not something casual. And did you guys ever confronted the person who did that to you?
No, it was never confronted. It came out, it happened when I was my seventh year of life. And then it came out in my eighth grade year. So there was no connection. Well, I took that back. I think what re-triggered these conversations with my friend is because one of the family members started going to the school that I went to, and we were a small school. So, and that girl, I have a feeling it was happening to her because it was a family member. Because I remember her when he left back to Mexico, she was like, "Oh, your boyfriend told me to tell you that he's leaving back to Mexico, but to tell you bye." And I remember being a little girl being like, that sigh of relief, like he's gone, right? But no, it was never an issue that we were able to address with that person. But what I did do one time and with my ex-husband, it was hitting me really hard. I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to this gentleman, and I had my ex-husband take me to the location of where it happened. And I literally just read it, ripped it up, and I threw it out the window, and I gave it to my higher power, and I let it go. And my situation with my mom, and to go more in depth, it wasn't just that situation though. That why there's had to healing continues, right? Because I was gang raped in my 20s. And when they brought me back to my house, my mom she didn't know what was going on, but I remember just screaming and crying for my dad because I knew something had happened. And because I had been drugged, and she called the police on me. And there's like, oh, she's on drugs. And it was just like, and so it was like, once again, here we go again. You're not looking to me as your child. You're looking to find something that like I was doing wrong, and I didn't do nothing wrong. Me and her have never talked about that situation, but she is aware of it. And then also too, during COVID, I was raped multiple times during my, in a domestic partnership. So there's been different levels of sexual abuse that I've experienced, but I think, and I now know now those are things that I use to help other young girls and other women, because those are very heavy conversations. But I've been there, and I know what it's like not to be heard. So sometimes that listening ear is what people navigate to me for.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a tough conversation and to be so vulnerable, so honest, right? Because it's almost like you're undressing yourself, like in a sense, your heart. But one of the things that why I created this space is for us to have a safe space to share some of these stories. Because the only way we break generational cycles or break those, you know, patterns is by us talking about it, bringing it to the darkness into light, right? I've had to have my separate conversation with my mom, and the purpose. And I had this conversation. I have 2 kids; they're already adults, but I give them credit for me to do a lot of things that I've been able to do. The minute I found that I was a mom, the minute I felt that my son moved in my tummy when I was pregnant, I realized I wanted something better for him. Put me in a different journey, which is what you're going through. It took you a little longer because you had a lot more challenges, that you had to overcome.
Yeah.
And I hope that when your kids hear and see this, they can understand,
Yeah.
your journey, and you guys can build that relationship, because you were battling your own, and nobody was there to take care of you. Nobody was there nurturing you, loving you, supporting you, protecting you. And how could you do that with your children when you weren't taught, you weren't shown that? So you had to find that through the long, and it's unfortunate that you had to go through this. I'm so sorry that that's been your history. And but one of the things I have to say, that when I was talking to Mary, she kind of a little bit she shared her story, and she told me a little bit about you. And I'm like, out of something so painful, so dark, you've been able to transform this and use it as your fuel to motivate you because you really want to change lives. You talked about how, and this is something I also want to change, because women tend to compete with each other. And I've seen it. It happened to me. That's why when you're talking about, I always wanted to be a friend, I always say, I can turn around and say I have a best friend, because I don't. I've had friends that unfortunately have betrayed me. And so my daughter, who's now an adult, says, "Mom, you need to stop being so trusting. You're too nice." And I'm like, I can't change who I am. God made me this way. And if people hurt me, I go, they need to, they need to answer to him, not to me. You know what I mean? It's going to hurt. And yes, it is. But what I'm trying to do is change that with the generation that I'm mentoring. It's like, and one of the examples that I give the girls that I mentor is, and I use this in one of the episodes, that I remember learning about the crab syndrome, where you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, and the crabs, instead of helping each other up, they pull each other down. Right? When women are envious, they try everything to sabotage your growth, or, tell you you look good when you don't. I've had that experience. But then you have a community of ants, and I use another example where the ants, you get one that goes exploring and finds food. That little ant goes back to the community and say, "Hey, let's go eat." and you all of a sudden you see a little trail of ants, right? They all come in and together. So when I use that example, I say, I don't want to be a crab. I want to be an ant. I want to create a community that we're all here to uplift. This is part of the uplifting community because I'm sharing my story. I am opening so we can share stories. And as we're sharing stories, we're helping each other. We're supporting, elevating, and celebrating. Our journeys have been tough. Your journey has been super tough, but what you're experiencing right now, you're putting in a curriculum. You're going to speak to the youth. And when they're hearing you, they're finding themselves relatable to part of your story or some of your story or more of your story, right? They're gonna believe you because you're talking from the heart. You're as tough, as hard, as dark as the experience that you've been through. You're not shying away from sharing it because you are trying to prevent someone else to go through what you went through. So that is amazing. That's, I respect that you're doing that. And I think I share that with someone else that sometimes, and I don't know what your belief system is, but I do believe that God has a purpose for all of us. And when some of us have a purpose, sometimes our roads tend to be a little bit more challenging than others because there'll be times I'm sure you probably, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to? Why me, God, right?
I still go through that.
You're still going through that. But you know what? Because now you have a relatable story. And one thing that I've learned through my life experience, because I tell my kids this life, and I'm just telling you guys, brace yourself because life is about ups and downs. It's like intervals. Sometimes are great and sometimes they're not. And then, but when you're down, you're learning something so you don't repeat the cycles. When you get up, I'm not doing that again, but you're going to learn something new, right? And I'm telling that to my kids because they're all going to go through their journeys, part of their path. But we wouldn't be able to teach, advocate if our life would be easy, you know?
Exactly.
We wouldn't. And so you're breaking a lot of those cycles because, you had to experience that. Your kids hopefully can learn from that, right?
Yes.
And you're creating another family with the people that you're building around you. And the fact that you said something really important that when you were getting kind of bullied on Facebook, and it was just, I believe it's just someone intimidated by maybe the way you look, your homegirl came out and you're like, I'm going to go,
Yeah.
right? I grew up in LA, so I know
You
that
go.
mentality. Let's go take care of it. But I'm glad that someone saw you at a different level because they're seeing you elevating yourself to another level. And sometimes that's what we need to do. Sometimes we outgrow the people that we're around because we're elevating to another level. And that level means you're hanging around with other people that want to do better, right?
Yeah.
Want to give back. They want to grow, whether through education, through community. You're already doing what you're doing right now, you weren't doing 5 years ago. The people that you're influencing with Homegirlz del Corazón, you're creating that space for them where they're seeing themselves in a different light. Because I was talking to Mary, she's like, I didn't know I could do this. I didn't know I could write a chapter. So you're helping elevate others around you. I just want to say that because
I appreciate
if you sometimes also, you mentioned the imposter syndrome, we don't feel like we're good enough.
Yeah.
I could tell you from where I'm sitting and I'm watching you and talking to Mary, you're helping change lives. You help change Mary's life and you're helping change the girls that are hearing you share your story.
Thank you. And I appreciate that so much because exactly what you're saying, right? Like there's always going to be new challenges, especially the more you're touching of hearts, the more the pushback's going to be on it. And like even right now, I'm going through some stuff. I got a hurtful email with just questioning my credibility in the work that I do. And it was like, am I going to my inner Nina? I'm like, my little girl, what she's hearing is you're bad. You did something wrong. And I'm racing to mind, like, what could I have done? Like, I'm so specific and very careful with my work. But that hurt little part of myself is hearing all this negativity. And the difference now is that I don't got to go try to change my clothes and go hurt somebody. Now I'm like, what do I do? I don't have to do that. I have some amazing mentors and girlfriends, like my homegirls. Like last night I was in tears and it was just like why? And then today I was like, okay, I woke up feeling better. Cause my spirituality, I'm very centered in my higher power. He got me through the night cause I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going through a breakup. Like I got to wake up and deal with this tomorrow. And then it was like, I reached out to women that who I'm inspired by, who do amazing work, but who are so centered in love. And they guided me. And it was just like, this is none of those things that I'm going to have to walk through. I'm looking for the learning lesson and what's going to be created out of this experience now. right? And so out of like coming from wanting to beat someone up to creating this homegirls to now like understanding and even like going back to what you're saying, like, we were so loving and giving. What my healing process taught me, I've never known what discernment was. I can practice discernment today and it feels good. It shows my value of who I am. And so all these different levels of change within myself, and there's so many of them, and they're not just going upwards, they're, lateral which way. It's so beautiful. And I really like to believe that when I walk into spaces, people feel my healthy energy. Like, not I say healthy because I'm still human, right? But this loving energy, right? And so when I work with the youth or I work with the women, I didn't want to work with youth for the longest time. Heck no. I remember being one of them. I know it comes with them. And I still get some of that. But I remember my healing process to become what I needed at that age. And that's why I think the embrace of me is so powerful from people is because I'm authentically that person and I don't have to apologize for it. I apologize for myself for so many things that I had no business apologizing for. And I stand firm in who I am and I believe in what I have to believe in because I've had experiences. I've walked through the hurts and pains and no one can take that away from me. And I will freely give you the love behind it, but I'm going to make sure that I'm taking care of myself in the process. So that's a big part of Homegirlz del Corazón is the conversation of self-love. We do not live in a community where self-love is talked about. We don't go to school. We learn English, math, like all the different like educational spaces, but we're not taught to have relationships. We're not taught to have all these different things about for ourselves. And how dare we as adults have a self? Because then now we got kids. You're selfish. It's called self-loving because I can't give what I don't have, right? So the dynamics of Homegirlz has just grown and it just grows with every situation that we walk through, experiences or opportunities has just magnitude like this wave of self-love for people and to people and for ourselves. And it reflects in who we are.
That is incredible. Well, I want to say something with your presence because the minute you pop up and when you logged in, I'm like, you have this bright, vibe around you. And I want to say, and no, it's not your beautiful color hair. It's just a vibe. And you talk about discernment, right? And I do believe in that. And I've been talking about that a lot lately because in this journey that I'm in, is the healing journey. I've discovered that God has been introducing me to different people that are in the same journey that I'm in, but they're also aware that it's all intentional, right? And so it's incredible for me because it's a reminder that where I'm going and I'm doing the right thing. Because if I'm following my heart and the guidance that I'm getting, then it can be wrong. But like you mentioned, people are going to attack you. When you're in the right path and you're doing what your purpose, what your God gives purpose is, you're going to piss a lot of people with bad energy, right? Because the light bothers those that are in darkness. And I've been hearing a lot because I go through messages. Sometimes I get downloads, what I call downloads. And like I share this a lot sometimes in my dreams or when I get like do an episode on this or do a recording on this. And so I'm like, I guess I need to do this, And so part of it, I do understand that even with this journey that I'm in, there's some people that were against a lot of negativity. But I try that away. I'm like, no, you're not part of this because I'm talking to you. And after I do every session, it's a reminder that I'm in the right place, that I'm doing what I'm meant to do. Recording amazing stories that is going to heal, is going to help, right? And it's creating that community. I'm hearing you share your stories. My mind is like, oh my God, we need to get together with so-and-so because this person could be great with this. My mind is operating that because it's creating that space for us.
Yeah.
So disregard, because you're going to get, if you're not getting those negative comments, then we're not doing something right because we're going to piss people off. It's our nature because you're doing something that, they're hurt people. They say hurt people, right?
Yep. Yes.
So they're manifesting their own insecurities or whatever they have going, and nobody's sitting there and say, how can I help you? Can I give you a hug maybe, So don't let that ruin your day.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to balance and put a balance of, okay, you got one hater. How is your scale going to tip when you put the people like Mary and the girls? How is your scale going to tip? It's going to tilt this way, right? The good is going to outweigh the negative because whatever you're putting out there, Maria Elena, is definitely benefiting many. So just remember that.
you.
So, and then if you get to that point, call me. I'll walk you off the ledge. We'll take our symbolic hoops off, just symbolic, because, and those that are watching us and maybe don't know the symbolism of the hoops, I'm wearing my small version hoops today, but typically I embrace, it took me a while, by the way, because I am Latina and I have hoops of all sizes. This is because I've been in corporate America, I couldn't wear hoops for a long time because stigma, right? You can't wear bright colors. You can't wear a certain thing. Now I wear my orange lipstick because orange is my color. I'm a little conservative in a sense right now, but hoops is one thing. Yeah. And grow up in LA, I grew up closer to South Central. Back in the days, like the thing is, if you're gonna go to battle and your hoops need to go off, your hand goes in a bun. Right? So when we talked about the symbolic of let's take a hoops here, when you see a Latina taking her hoops off, it's on. It's on.
And that tells you exactly where my mentality was at in that moment. And to think even when the youngsters asking, we're in a conversation, like, what would happen if you got into a fight? Well, I really don't. Well, I mean, of course I have those thoughts, but I'm not in spaces where I'm going to get into fights. And no, so, and go to the hoops, like we all wear big hoops. And before anything, these are my superpowers. I put them on. Even when I have no makeup on, I'm going to go walk on the beach out here blessed. These are my superpowers because I don't know if God's talking through them to me, but these are my superpowers. And I proudly, because I'm also a trauma-informed gang expert and I work in the juvenile courts and adult courts. And normally people that look like me or look like this do not show up with a sense of credibility. And it's like, no, I wear hoops. My tattoos are still visible. It's still who I am. It doesn't take away who I am as in the work that I do. So I with Homegirlz, what's really important is that we honor the culture, the life, who we were, and not lose it, and not have to look at the sense of like, no, I don't fit in. A lot of the tattoos that I got when I was working at the ACLU, the more I got, the more that I push began, right? And I get it. It's a very conservative space, even though it's a very liberal space. But there was still that. But it did not change. My work actually grew with this because I was finally able. This is what I always wanted to look like when I was on the streets. I just couldn't afford it. And then I had opportunities, but it was like, this is me. And when I walk into the juvenile halls, I walk proudly with my head high because just like you said, that glow about me, that's what people get from me. This just goes away. It's that glow about me that people are like, wow, and so it's just the things I've used to transfer from my past into now has just become like this sense of superpower, right? And so thank you for acknowledging like the things that I've gone through. And there's so much more and so much more hurt that I've caused, right? But like I said, you probably need 10 podcasts for this one. But thank you for creating this space because literally I was like, should I even do the podcast? I don't want to bring my hurt self in. And it was like, no, I needed to be in this moment. Like I'm not that person. And whatever that we have to go through with that space, I'll walk through. But I'm still who I am. And I have to be here and I got to be the voice of who I am and for other people that don't get to have their voices heard. And so I had to show up. So thank you for creating this space for me and just uplifting me. I needed it. Because when we talked that one day real shortly, I was like, she probably understands.
I grew up in LA, and just a little bit of context in the background because I grew up in Jersey, but I moved here when I was in 10th, end of 9th grade from Jersey, and I was in LA. Fun fact, I was in Huntington Park, so if you know where that is, right? So, close to South Central. So the school was really busy, so they had a bus my sister and I to Tahunga, the valley. And in Jersey, there were no cholos. This is an interesting story. This my education of the gang life back then. So for a couple months, we were bused over there. And then I remember there was one kid that was one of my classes. And if you watch that movie with James Olmos, Stand By Me, there was one kid that went into my class, and this is my first impression of a cholo because he was wearing, back in the 90s, this is late 80s. He had the oversized khaki, completely creased out, right? White t-shirt with a hairnet, right? Here I am, I'm sitting in my 9th grade class and I'm looking at him. I say, and I'm in my head, I'm like, pobrecito. His clothes doesn't fit. Maybe he has hand-me-down and he works in the kitchen because he's wearing a hairnet. I had no idea that that was actually a cholo look, right? Because, and this is at the time where you have like also the pompadours, the disco. So
Yeah.
everybody was getting bused to that school in Tujunga. So we had like the surfers, we had the jocks, then we had the cholos, and we had like the chachas. We call them like the chachas with the pompadour, the discos, red lips, and everything. And here I am not being able to fit in because I'm coming from Jersey. The styles were completely different. Then finally we moved to Huntington Park. Started in the 10th grade in Huntington Park, and there was a large concentration of gangs in there. You know, you had the brats, and I still didn't know anything about it. But the look that was relevant back there was Cholita look, right? Big hair, big hoops, red lipstick. And my parents were super conservative, so I was a really good girl, so I was very conservative. But I still had a little bit of like a little wild side in me that I couldn't explore because my mom will kill me. But I grew up in that environment, and I was a little sassy, and I knew how to defend myself because you had to in that kind of environment. Because you look a certain way, you become a target, right? You become a target regardless. If you look too conservative, you become a target. If you look like, you can kick butt, you also become a target. But I was able to be friends with everybody in the school. So I remember one time I went to a party, and one of the girls, a friend of mine, she was a cholita. I was already out of school and I had got my car. Her boyfriend was a little cholito, and they were breaking the windows of all the cars on the road in that house party that we were in. But he knew my car. My car was the only one that he didn't touch. And I was like, thank God, because I was like, I was like 19 years old. I'm like, I couldn't afford, but
Yeah.
but it helped me, right? And it's just, I'm more like, I want to be people's friends. I'm everybody's friend, but I always say, don't approach me, don't start, because I also know how to defend myself. Because you're in that environment, you have to choose. You have to also take care of yourself. So, but the inner like little joke is like, and I say it to my friends, don't make me take my hoops off. Don't make me take my hoops off, because that is like, Wonder Woman has a little
Wristbands, yeah.
this is ours. This is ours, right? This is a reflection of
Who we are, and that's what I love about Homegirls. It's like it's just really interesting. Like we are human beings in these lived experiences. It might look different from yours, but there's I mean there's not a powerful story behind it, and so that's what Homegirls del Corazón really creates is that space and normally like. And I want to just, I'm so excited, it being National Women's Month. Homegirls is going to be recognized, the proclamation on March 24th for San Diego County as Homegirls del Corazón Day. And it's like, wow, we've come far enough that in San Diego County that we're going to have a Homegirls Day. Like that speaks so much about the identity that we've been to give us some credibility that it's not that negative stigma of these girls are, doing this and this and that and living this kind of life, but that we can heal. I don't got to lose who I was. I loved who I was back then. She was hurt, but I've nurtured her and I've loved her. And this is a replication of it. And another thing that's really important is like what we share is even when we work with the youth or we talk in the communities, like there's like this like identity like the cholaism, like or choloism, like oh, it's cool to be a cholo, like the look, and it's like kids, we gotta be you got to be understanding of where this comes from. There's a lack of understanding and history of where it stems from and where it comes. We've been in survival mode our whole life, and you're trying to put on a Pendleton or Charlie Brown, trying to make it look cool with the big earrings, not understanding the hurts that we walk through that was that identity. And so really putting out there, it's not a fashion statement to be a homegirl or to be a chola. I went through heck behind that. And so that's another way that homegirls approaches it. It's like we don't not want you to become a homegirl because it looks cool and fresh. No, it's our hurts and we want you to understand it so you don't have to have that experience, and so that's something that's been really important with Homegirls del Corazón.
First of all, congratulations on the proclamation. Where is it, and what time, and who can go and celebrate with you?
It's going to be at the County Board of Supervisors meeting here in San Diego on the 24th of March, and anyone can go. We're inviting everyone. We want to show the love and support because it's Homegirls Day.
Yeah, it's
You
Homegirls.
don't hear that. Like
Well, send some information so we can also promote
you.
it and get the people out there to support.
Yeah.
I want to share a little bit of that story that you said because with social media, kind of like making the cholito look like a pop culture, and it is a pop culture, right? In a sense, it is. but kind of glamorizing it. And it is not glamour. And I could tell you, as a Salvadorian, right? Because one of the biggest gangs is Mara Salvatrucha, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just came back from my country, and I left my country as a child because of the war and the people that came to the war from here, which were out of the poor communities in here, and they learned the gang life here
Mm-hmm.
in the United States
And they take it back.
from other gangs, and they were actually Mexican gangs. So a lot of the Salvadorian Mara learned the gang life here from the Mexican gangs, like Flores Trece and the other thing, and it became one of the biggest gang, right? Well, as they were getting deported, they continued that crime mentality in El Salvador, and I'm so grateful that we have a president that has cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also lack of education, lack of resources for them to say, hey, you can do better. There's better. And so what's changing that is the school system in El Salvador. And I just want to touch that because I've lived it. I've experienced it. You know, why I couldn't go back to my country because the gang had taken over El Salvador. Mara Salvatrucha had taken over El Salvador, right?
Yes.
But now with the new president, they're all getting a lot of them are getting rehabilitated to education. And they're not allowed no gangs in the school. If you look like he enforced now a uniform setting, a proper way to dress in school. He provides schools. He provides each kid with 2 tablets. One they keep at home and one for school. And the president provides all the school like books and everything for every kid in the country because he's focused on education. Why education is important? Because education opens door. Education takes you away from the streets, right? And so that's important for the message, the people that you're, mentoring to focus on education.
Yes.
And it's okay to embrace a lot of the look. Don't lose the tradition because if we go back to the history of how that look of, the cholito it came from the suits, but it was a nice style. And it was a nice style, but it was that group of Mexican Chicanos were rebelling because they were being suppressed for being Latinos. They were being discriminated. It wasn't a gang life. It was them. It's like, this is who we are. This is our culture. We can't look like this and so from that, they translated into something more gang related, and it didn't start that way.
No, and I think that's especially working with the youth nowadays and just my connections in life and the gang life. Like this new generation of youth just don't have any understanding of the history of it. So they lack that education part of it. And then that's a lot of stuff that I knew growing up, but learned so much more in college. Like that was my way to find out, oh wow, this is really where it stems from. I'm reading it in books and it's not just conversations that we're having on the streets and the calles. And so like education was, like I said, like the core of everything. And going back with the MS gang members, the gentleman that was a part of that story that started Homegirlz del Corazón, he's one of my closest and best friends. He's a MS gang member and he's currently getting his PhD in criminology at Cal State Irvine. He just graduated from UC Berkeley. And we were sharing and we went to present in Chicago this last month in February. And he was speaking about that. And it's like, there's this whole visual of like you said, education is such a core part of changing lives. And he's a perfect example of that. Right. And so if it's working here, it has, in your sharing it's working in El Salvador, like there has to be something there telling you like for me, I found my identity as a woman of color. I never realized there was power behind that when I had my voice heard. And so all these educational opportunities, like it's constantly, please go to school or find something that inspires you to find better than who you are, to create. If you don't have an identity like I didn't have, find that to create it for yourself, but make sure that you're coming from a space of not your trauma, but healing through it to create that stronger identity.
And those great takeaways that you mentioned, right? Because we have to mentor. We don't always have the answers. You didn't have the answers when you were younger, but creating a community, and I always say that if I don't know the answer, I said, I am so grateful that I have a community of Latinas that I can touch and say, hey, I have a question, or do you know somebody? And I was just talking to another community leader, and she is focused on nuestra comunidad. Build your own community and a community of resources that we can help. I may not have the answers. You may not have the answers, but guess what? You can text somebody and say, hey, you know someone. Can you put me in contact with so-and-so, right? And that's what we're doing for us. So we're going to do that for the next generation. And I'm going back to education where it's important because as we learned, we're opening the doors for those around us that are watching. I'm sure a lot of people are watching you. They've seen those I've seen the old version of you who probably said, she's not going to do anything. Yeah,
Yes.
you know, they counted you out. They already figured out, and they would to look at you now and they're like, well, that's surprising that we didn't think he was going to do that, right? We hear a lot more negative than we hear
Mhm.
positive when we're in
Yeah.
certain environments.
Mhm.
But you're doing it, and I'm not doing it for anybody, you're doing it for yourself, and in that process, what you're not realizing, you're helping others in the process.
And
So
I'm
that's
hel
incredible.
and I'm helping my little girl. I think that's been the number one thing, and that's why I love the name of your podcast, Inner Niña. She's been the core of all of this. Every experience she has been with me, and I have such a beautiful relationship with her. Like, I take her out on dates. I'll be like, "Okay, man, like, let's go for a drive," and I'll, like, act like I'll put the seatbelt on her, like, sh and I visualize, like, the picture I sent you, right? I visualize her, like, with my curly hair sitting there next to me, and I'll hold her hand or I'll go hiking and I'll just have conversations with her. I'm in a new stage of my life. I'm 49 years old and in a, ending a marriage that was so unhealthy. And now I'm learning about what love is now for me. But I gotta really check in with my little girl. Like, I have conversations like, what, this is exciting. 'Cause I want to check in with her. Does it feel good to her? Because she wasn't checked in when she was a little girl. So just those inner conversations with her. And when I tell people about this, they're like, what? I'm like, she's my little best friend. And it's like, she loves it. And I feel it inside the core. So everything that I do exemplifies from her feeling heard and loved and having identity finally and knowing that I'm taking care of her. And I trust myself to take care of her today. I couldn't trust myself to take care of my kids. And what that's going on, I want to share really quickly. My 25-year-old son that went through all the stuff he went through, and he lives here in Tijuana with me. He has his own family. He had my first grandbaby, and it's this little girl who light of my life. And it hurts sometimes because she lives on this side of the border, and she doesn't get to see the amazing Maria Elena, our mom, grandma that is on that side of the border. So right now, my new extent is how am I going to break this border down so my granddaughter can be inspired and be empowered either side, or if it's even on this side. So I'm trying to find ways to be empowered over here because there was a lot of trauma I experienced during COVID on this side over here. But this little girl is getting to be gets the best version of me. And then so my son gets to see me and just be like all my kids, like, minus the two that are not in my life right now, loving, beautiful relationship. My kids are finally feeling safe with me. And for me, those are like the moments as a mom where I really beat myself up for a long time is like my daughter, who's 30 years old, trusts me to take her across the border for a doctor's appointment. That was something she would have never done. But finally, she trusts me. My son trusts me with his little girl. My other daughter, my baby, she wants to come here and live here every once in a while. She trusts me to be here with me. And I'm the one person in her whole life that she can share anything with. And she won't be judged. I will still be a mom, but she knows I'll listen. And so out of all this, that little girl, Maria Elena, finally has a family that stems from her story.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love the fact that your bestie is your little inner niña.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't matter. And that's kind of like why I called it Inner Niña because, and I say that a lot, regardless of this shell we see here,
Mhm.
there's this one little girl inside that is still longing, right? Is still healing, is still so we need to embrace her. We need to love her. We need to hug her. We need to spoil her. We need
Mhm.
to remind her she's incredible. She's beautiful. She's everything we didn't get a chance to hear
Yes.
growing up. We need to tell it to ourselves. And you mentioned you went through very many bad relationships looking for love, but we need to start with self-love. We need to and when we self-love and we find our own value, then we put
Mhm.
those boundaries to make sure that we are being valued and
Mhm.
loved the way
Yes.
we deserve. Not
Yes.
taking scraps, not, giving and not reciprocating, but having someone that sees our worth. And if they don't see it, I'm gonna quote like a Beyonce song to the left,
Exactly.
to the left.
And it's such an empowering feeling to be able to be in that space because for a long time I couldn't. Like, I would accept anything. Like you said, those scraps were like were like gold to me. And now it's like just like I said, like even thinking about getting to a relationship, like, no, it's a process. I'm still learning who I am in that space. And it's not just about me. There's other people that are impacted by my choices. But I got to start with me. And that goes back to that discernment, right? It's not only using discernment in my like friendships. I've had to unfortunately let go of some people in my life from a loving space, but to take care of me. if I'm going to implement that with everybody else, I darn well better be doing that with the person wants to share a life with me if I choose to go that way. And so it's like I've gotten very, very loving for her. And like going back to my little girl, it's all about her. It's if she's safe. And so, yeah, I think I'm doing a pretty good job.
I love it.
It's
I
a
love
working
it.
process, but yes.
I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I enjoy hearing that. I'm gonna use that for me. I need to start taking her out.
Yes.
I'm gonna,
Oh,
I, I'm gonna take her out to things that she never went to, you know.
yes.
But I
And
love
people
that
will
you're
think you're
doing that.
crazy, but it's your experience. Your
Yes,
experience, I can go back to those days, but I can still bring her here with like, she's never left me. Every
yeah,
choice, every mask, every part of me that's protected me has been a part of her survival mode, and I want her to experience living now. So I get for
perfect.
that.
That's great. So what
Yeah.
are you working on now?
So right now So I'm doing work in juvenile halls. That's kind of a hold for a second until we get this thing cleared up. The extension of our organization, we want to provide our curriculum for the youth and women in the community. Just trying to find the space though is really hard and the financial needs because of consistency of it. Because you work with people, you have to be consistent. And that's one thing that's really, really hard. And I don't think when we talk about resources or funding, that's a big, like, they know that's a need, but it's not really taken into consideration full heart when we talk about these things. So a space is needed, but I'm working on cases here in California as a trauma informed gay expert. But right now, my focus and Homegirlz has extended not only into here in San Diego County, but we are now part of the United States Legal Empowerment Network and the Global Network. Me and Mary just went to Panama this last year to go present and do a facilitation with other people that were formerly incarcerated, like from Brazil, from Mexico, that were from the United States, and we trained them. Like we will participate in the training of like how to implement healing, trauma and healing informed care into these works, whether if it's organizational work, community work, whether if it's policy work, laws, healing and trauma is interwoven everywhere. And that's what our goal is right now. So with that, I'm partnering with the gentleman I spoke about earlier. We're going to be expanding. We are creating a training to teach people. We want to train people like in nonprofit sectors, governmental spaces to teach them from the leadership down, awareness of how they show up in their work and how their trauma shows up every single day through fun curricular activities, creating conversations and really creating a safe space for them. I think it was so amazing to me when I was invited to do a training for the public defender's office for the juvenile courts. And I literally I do is, I don't have them with me, but it's a heart that I have like what a heart looks like, but it's broken up into pieces really pretty. And it's to measure like what kind of emotions are you carrying within your heart and how much. And it's a color experience. And then I had all these attorneys talking, and we just began to talk about what they're walking through. I had attorneys crying because one attorney was struggling with a cancer situation, and another attorney was struggling like a friend who just lost a family member or friend with cancer. And it was like it created this conversation that needed healing in this workspace before they even step out and work with the youth, right? And so out of that experience, that's my goal, is we're building this collaborative with other organizations to go hopefully in Mexico City and somewhere in the United States. We're still trying to figure out the organization to train the leaders how to lead in a healthy space.
That's incredible. Sign me in. I'm curious to learn. I'm into leadership. My career is in HR.
Okay.
So I'm HR. I've been in HR for over 15 years.
Mhm.
And one of the things I'm very passionate is developing our leaders because the only way for things to work is top
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah.
And I'm one from maybe my life experience that I lead by example. And I also rebel when I hear, do as I say and not as I do. It didn't work when I was a child. It doesn't work in the workplace. We need to model the behavior that we want our employees, our team to follow. So I'm always looking for ways on developing ideas and tips that I can bring back to the people I develop and train because
Yes.
it's important, right? So sign me up for that.
And thank you for acknowledging that because a lot of leadership doesn't. When I was working with other organizations, it was like, let's bring in someone to work with us. Okay, we're going to pay all this money for this person to come in, but leadership never showed up. It was the staff. And
Right.
the staff's like, how are we supposed to take this seriously if you're not doing it? And you said a lot, a lot. So this is something specific for that. And we make it where it's fun. It's not complicated. And the whole part of self is the self-awareness. And when you're conscious of it, like I can walk into a boardroom and sit down with a bunch of people and I could already see their traumas, whether they're sitting like this, they're looking like this, or their bodies like this, how they speak to you, how they, I can already see where, but that's come from understanding myself and working with others in trauma. So if we just teach those tools and we learn about ourselves, we're going to have a lot of the answers. A lot of people are like, I don't know how to do this. It's like, well, what's in you? Let's just do a little digging. And so that's how our approach is. Real simplistic, very fun and creative. Important that it's not a shaming though. The core part of Homegirlz del Corazón is the rose. When we walk through with the people with their lived experience, we envelop it as the growth of the rose, their roots, which is like the stem of their traumas. We want it to be visually pretty. We've lived a dark life already. We want to make it beautiful. So then when they carry their narrative, it's a positive narrative from a rose perspective.
That's great. I know Mary used the Tupac
Rose that goes from
reference, or
country.
the rose that rose from the concrete.
I know what that tattooed on me.
Yeah, I see it on you. That's great. Now I know why she mentioned that. That's a great I don't know, reference. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So, what kind of words of wisdom would you share with our audience?
Give yourself the opportunity to find out who you really are. Everyone's going to have something to say about you, but the only person you lay down with at night is yourself, and with your thoughts, and how you think about yourself is what you're going to wake up in the morning. So I know for myself, I feel so much self-affirmations, and also find something greater than yourself to connect with. Like do not put me on a pedestal. I'm human. Don't make me greater than I am. But there is something greater guiding me. And that's what I trust in every single day. Even going through this situation I'm going through now, I'm going to be great because there's something more to come out of it. And so just give yourself that chance to find out who you are.
Amen.
That's a beautiful
I
love
believe it.
story. It's a
I
beautiful love
believe
story.
it. I believe it. And so, now that you're part of our community, we're part of the same community now. We're going to be in touch, and you have my number. So if you ever get stuck, you need someone to talk to,
Thank you,
call
Maria. I
me,
appreciate
text
that.
me.
I
you
sure
know.
will.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Get
We're
that
gonna,
job.
you know what? Next time I see you, I'm gonna wear my bigger hoops. So it'll give me a chance. It took me a while, and it took me a while to get comfortable with why I feel is my. I think I was dim for so long, just trying to please a lot of people, and I'm just pleasing myself. My circle might be small, but it's selective, because if you're, to me, the way I see it, and I tell that to my kids, if you're not adding positive vibe into my life, you're not going to take away from mine.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're blood family. If you're not putting in, it's not nothing monetary. It's not tangible. Is making sure, because I reach out, how you doing, or touch base, but don't come looking for me when you need something. Is being there regardless. And so that's very important, and that's why my community is different, because I've experienced so much already, and it's okay. It's about being selective. So you're gonna be fine. I'm telling you, you're gonna be fine.
Thank you. Thank you
I
so
know
much.
it. So, and we're
I
gonna be in
appreciate
touch. We're gonna see each other soon.
Okay.
Hopefully next weekend. I'm gonna get with Mary. Maybe we can get together for lunch if you guys are around.
Okay, let me look at my calendar.
Yeah. So,
But I will try, believe me, because I would love to. So thank you.
so I make a little drive up there where you guys are at.
I love that.
So I love how you shared your story about how you're nurturing your inner niña and your little bestie. If you had to go back and talk to your little inner niña, your little Maria Elena, what would you tell her?
Don't ever be ashamed of wanting to be loved, but it begins with yourself. That little girl was shamed very much for wanting just to be loved, even to the point like, and I think it was, and I get now the context from where it came from, the family, like, oh my God, another boyfriend. It was just a longing that they didn't have a connection to that. I just wanted to be loved. And I will never be ashamed ever again by anyone, whether it's a male or female parent or child. Anyone will shame me for wanting to love myself, because I know I deserve it, because I know how much love I give. And no one will take that away from me, because that little girl felt so much shame, like to the point where she was ashamed of her body. She would walk with her head down. That she would accept crumbs, and no. And because of that thought process, she just accepted it. And no, my little girl, you deserve all the love in the world. And I will continue to give that to her.
Great message, and great that she knows that you're taking care of her, because if she has you as a best friend and she's enjoying this stage in your life, she's doing okay.
Thank you.
So congratulations on that. You're doing incredible work. And I know we're going to connect again, because I know
Yes.
you have more of that story that I want others to share. So we probably will have to do a part 2.
I tell you, I got 4, 5,
and
and 6
continue.
podcasts in me.
Let's do it. Those stories need to be told, and we're just having a conversation, but The good thing is others are listening and it's inspiring. Look, it's gone by so fast.
It's so natural and it's painless. And even if you're asking about next sports, we're going to begin next month our podcast. We're still trying to find a name. So we might need to have you come join us to have.
I'll bring my colors and my hoops.
Yes.
Bring my, I'm being a little bit mellow right now. And on a side note, on a separate, I will let you know some of the things that I'm going through. But I do believe that what we go through is for a reason. Sometimes the roads might come with thorns but at the end of the day, we realize that we're going to blossom into something better. Shedding our old skin and the things that we have to go through is because there's a better version of us awaiting for us. And I really truly believe that. And I always say that for one bad thing that always happens that God allows me to go through, because I've been through a lot, I always get rewarded with 10 blessings or more. And I tell this to my mom because I think God has a sense of humor, because patience is not my virtue. I was super early when he was giving other things, but when it comes to patience, I'm like, so that's where he tests me, because I know it's coming. So I'm like, I know I have to wait this storm out. And I know, I said, but God, you didn't give me patience. And that's why he gives me some of the challenges, because he makes me wait. And so I already know that. So it's great. So whatever you're going, I could tell you it's going to pass. We're going to have a conversation in the future. We're going to make it into another episode.
Yeah. Yes. That's going to be a great episode.
We're going to make it into another episode, because it's those challenges in life, those lessons in life that create opportunities for us to grow and help others in the process.
Exactly.
Okay. So I want to say thank you, Maria Elena. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and spending time with you. Thank you for joining our Inner Niña journey. And to our listeners, thank you for listening and for holding space for me. I am Maria Benitez, and this is our journey together. Until next time. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for holding space for me. And thank you for allowing me to walk beside you as you heal your inner niña. Until next time, please don't forget to follow and subscribe.